Hello, this is Abby Newman, and here's my video about Chapter 5 in the Content Area Reading textbook. The first concept that is talked about in this book is about explicit strategies for learning specific things. So with each content area, there's going to be a different strategy, obviously different strategies for each content area. So the first step in using any explicit strategy is the students and the teacher need to know what type of strategy they're using, what goes into the strategy, and what the end goal of using that learning strategy is within the content area. So the second thing that the textbook talks about that we need to do with explicit strategy instruction is that we need to demonstrate and model the strategy multiple times. The students, they have very little prior knowledge to how that strategy goes and the content that they're using that strategy to learn. So we need to explicitly show them how that strategy works multiple times. So once the students are familiar with the strategy and they know which strategy they need to use for each specific content type of learning, you're going to have them practice that strategy because they're not going to be able to use it on their own until they have practiced and practiced and practiced that strategy. The next important thing in the content area reading textbook was the section on lesson plan formats, and I thought this was really interesting because it basically gives you a whole bunch of options to where you should start when you're planning a lesson. The first one is you could start first with the standards, and basically you're just going to start with the standards first so you know what the students are going to have to be learning according to the standards. Another one is instructional goals. So basically you're going to be asking yourself, while you're creating this lesson, what do the students need to know? What is the purpose of this lesson? What should the students be getting from this lesson? So the next one is essential questions, and I've actually used this to make lesson plans in my pedagogy class before. And this is really nice because you're going to be talking specifically about the questions that the students are going to need to answer by the end. So you need to think about what are the big concepts that go along with the essential questions. How should you be chunking and teaching this lesson? The next one is you can approach it by thinking of instructional strategies and activities. So this often comes when you have instructional materials already that you want to use. So you start from already having that instructional activity and then build the lesson around that. So the next one is instructional materials and resources. This one's pretty similar to the last one, but this one is you need to think about what the students will need to have to engage in the learning. So what materials and resources they are going to need to be successful in this lesson. The next one is new literacies, which basically just means how are you going to integrate technology and media into the lesson to enhance the lesson. So if you start already knowing you want to use a specific type of program or a specific type of literacy for the students for their assignment, then you know how to basically build your lesson around that new literacy. This is something we talked about earlier in the semester in our discussions. And the final type of learning, oh my God, what is it called? Okay. The final type of lesson plan format is to start from assessment. So basically you're just going to be starting from what assessment tools am I going to be using to evaluate the students? So how are the students going to be engaging in either self-assessment or peer assessment or formative or summative assessment? So hopefully it's going to be summative because that ends up being more valuable in the end, but basically you want to start, this would be starting knowing what the students are going to be producing and having at the end of your lesson. So you're starting backward, starting from the end and going backwards. So one of the instructional frameworks that our textbook talks about is the BDA instructional framework, which stands for before, during, and after. And I've particularly thought this was an interesting one because I'm going to be an English teacher. Basically, it just lays out what you're going to have the students do and consider before reading, during reading, and after reading. So before reading, you're going to want to motivate the readers. So you want to get the students interested in the text because the students aren't going to care unless you make a personal connection to them. You want to activate their prior knowledge. That kind of goes along with the motivation. Basically, you want to not only connect prior lessons with the new lessons, but connect prior information they learned from their personal lives to the new information that you're going to be teaching them. You're also, before reading, going to be introducing key vocabulary and concepts. So they know what vocab to look for, and they're going to be enhancing their knowledge of this vocabulary and the concepts that they're being introduced to, and then they'll be learning more about them through their reading. And then also before reading, you're going to want to develop metacognitive awareness of the task. So this basically means you want the student to think about what they're thinking about while they're reading the text. So it's basically having discussions about the point of reading the text and discussing what the reading tasks specifically are. So during reading, the most important thing that the students are going to do during reading is they need to be able to distinguish the important ideas from the less important ideas. I know that in my academic past, I've been given texts and I haven't been able to determine what I'm supposed to be getting from the text. So you just look at it and it seems overwhelming because you consider everything as important. You know, myself, I've highlighted basically entire texts not getting the point. And I think that how you do this, how you help students with this, is you want to give them a specific goal. This goes to the before reading section, is you want to give them a specific goal they're trying to reach by reading this content. Like giving them sort of prompts or questions. Basically, they need to know what they're looking for, because just giving them the content and letting them run wild with it doesn't necessarily enrich their learning. So after reading, basically, you're just going to want to have them extend and elaborate their ideas from the text. Be that in different project forms or discussions, and whatever you want it to be. But basically, it's just analyzing what everybody got out of the text individually. So the next section, I thought it really paired well with the developing a lesson plan section, is talking about the components of a well-designed unit. So first, maybe this isn't the first thing you generate, but you're going to want to have a title that reflects the theme or the topic of the unit assignment. The major concepts to be learned is the next thing that you're going to need to have for a well-designed unit. So basically, you're creating the learning objectives for the unit. What knowledge are the students developing? And this generally goes a lot with essential questions. And this is the way I have found building lesson plans and unit plans in the end is helpful, is starting from big guiding questions and then chunking it out that way. Then eventually you're going to have the text and the information to be studied by the students. So this could be a textbook or a curriculum, or you could supplement things from everywhere else. But basically, you need to figure out what you want the students to learn, and then figure out how they're going to learn that. What are they looking at to learn that? And then finally, you're going to want to figure out exactly how this unit is going to be assessed. And you probably, because it's a unit, each lesson is going to have some sort of assessment. And maybe those small assessments, they build up to the larger assessment, or maybe you have a different independent larger assessment. Either way, you're going to want to figure out how you're going to measure student learning. So something that this chapter really focused on was collaboration between students. And this is something that I find really helpful for my future teaching career, is the different types of cooperative learning they talked about. The first one was jigsaw groups, and basically this is where you assign each student a special task. So maybe each student has a specific role they have to complete, or maybe they have a specific subtopic they're going to be an expert on. Either way, you're breaking up the content and giving it to the students in chunks, so each student knows what they're focusing on and can get that done specifically. The next one is student teams achievement divisions, which basically just means you have a whole class discussions and then you develop some sort of group activities after. So you start with a big group and then go small. Another important thing is learning circles. So basically this is just a group from like 2 people to 6 people, and you have them do a collaborative project. Learning circles can mean many different things, but basically it's just having them in small groups. So group investigation is the last one, and basically that's when you assign each group to look at one subject. So one group is going to investigate a specific subject or topic. This last section that I highlighted was creating the ideal environment for discussion, and I think this is probably some of the most important content in this chapter. So I think first it said you need to arrange the classroom to facilitate discussion. So that means not having them all in rows looking at you, the teacher, but you want them in circles or at tables or somehow looking at each other so it's a collaborative effort, because the learning should be more, especially in discussions, should be more about them collaborating with each other instead of just the teacher preaching the information to them. You also want to encourage listening in your classroom. Everybody should get a chance to speak if they have something to say, and everyone should be heard as well. So one way that the book highlighted that you could do this is if the teacher gives students teacher statements, sometimes statements can elicit more of a real, actual, appropriate response than, say, a question. Because if the students aren't prepped to actually give a good discussion answer to a question, they can give kind of a canned answer because they're more likely to respond authentically to a specific statement if they are not used to having discussions. So this is the most important thing to me, is establishing a goal for the discussion. You want to give the students specific instructions on what they should be discussing. So whether that be a statement or a question or a topic, whatever that is, you need to be extremely specific in your directions. And then this goes along with that is you want to focus the discussion. So it shouldn't be something super broad and they're kind of like going all over the place in different parts of the discussion. You want to give them something specific to talk about. And then the last thing is avoid squelching the discussion. You want to just give your students time to talk in class, time to express their opinions, because the last thing you want to do is cut the discussion off. So finally, I want to talk about how I'm going to use this in my classroom. Basically, I think the most important thing that I took away from this, you probably gleaned this from how I talked about it, is the sections on discussion and collaboration. Because I plan to be a middle school English teacher, the discussion aspect to me is a very useful tool to get the students to be actually learning the content. They care a lot more when they get to express their opinions in open forum discussions than if they are just answering worksheet questions or answering prompts from the textbook. You want to give them open-ended things so that they're expressing their own opinion and relating it to their own lives. So I think that's the thing that I'm going to be taking away mostly from this chapter, is that you need to give the students the space and the breathing room to have those discussions. You need to give them the tools to have productive discussions, first of all, and then they need to be able to have that time to have their discussions. Because I think no matter what setting you're having a class discussion in, whether that be small group or large group, the students don't naturally have that ability to have those discussions. So you need to make your classroom a safe space for them to be able to express their opinions on whatever it is. So this concludes my video about our content area reading textbook, chapter 5. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk. Thanks.